Picture this scene. The year is 221 BCE. After centuries of brutal, relentless warfare, 7 warring states have been forged into a single, colossal empire, stretching further than any before it. And standing at its apex is a man unlike any other, Qin Shi Huang, the first emperor of China. He has commanded armies, built a colossal wall, and even entombed an entire clay army to guard him in the afterlife. But in his magnificent, sprawling palace, hidden behind walls of jade and gold, whispers begin to circulate. Whispers of a new, desperate quest, one that defies nature itself, eternal life. You are about to discover that this legendary emperor, obsessed with living forever, would ultimately consume vials of liquid mercury, believing it to be the key to immortality, unaware that he was slowly, agonizingly poisoning himself, transforming the very source of his imperial power into the architect of his own gruesome end. If you're drawn to history's most audacious and terrifying figures, then lend your curiosity here. Subscribe for more, hit the like button, and let me know where you're watching from in the comments. I'm always amazed by how these ancient tales connect us across continents and centuries. The world into which Qin Shi Huang was born, then known as Zheng, in 259 BCE, was a crucible of conflict. This was the Warring States period, a ceaseless, bloody tapestry woven from the ambitions of 7 powerful kingdoms vying for ultimate supremacy over the fractured land of China. Imagine a landscape scarred by constant battle, where entire cities could be put to the torch, and the cries of the vanquished echoed across desolate plains. Alliances shifted like desert sands, betrayals were commonplace, and every border was a front line in an unending struggle for survival and dominance. It was an era where military might dictate destiny, and weakness was an invitation to oblivion. Within this brutal context, Zheng ascended to the throne of Qin, a Western state renowned for its militarism, its harsh legalist philosophy, and its relentless efficiency in war. Qin was not merely a state, it was a machine, honed by generations of conflict, fueled by a relentless drive for expansion, and ready to devour its neighbors without mercy. Its very existence was predicated on conquest, its people forged into an instrument of war, where agricultural output was directly tied to military achievement, and every citizen understood their role in the grand, violent design. Zheng's own lineage was shrouded in intrigue and controversy from his earliest days. Though officially the son of King Zhuangxiang of Qin, whispers persisted that his true father was Liu Buwei, a powerful and cunning merchant who had served as the king's chancellor. This wasn't mere court gossip, it was a deep, unsettling cloud of uncertain paternity that followed Zheng, questioning his very legitimacy to the throne. Whether true or not, this shadow, combined with the cutthroat politics of the Qin court, a viper's nest of ambition, conspiracy, and sudden, brutal power shifts, forged a young man of extraordinary ruthlessness and singular focus. From an early age, Zheng was exposed to the brutal realities of power. He witnessed the machinations of scheming ministers, the swift betrayals of supposed allies, and the chilling executions of those who fell out of favor. These experiences instilled in him a profound distrust of others, a deep-seated paranoia, and an unshakable belief in his own authority as the sole guarantor of order and strength. He learned that loyalty was fleeting, and power was the only absolute truth. His youth was marked by a rapid and often violent consolidation of power. At just 13, he became king, inheriting a kingdom but not yet full control. For years, powerful regents, including the ubiquitous Liu Buwei, sought to manipulate the boy king, hoping to extend their own influence over the nascent monarch. But Zheng was no puppet. He observed, he learned, and he waited. It was not until 238 BCE, at the age of 21, that he fully seized control, unleashed by years of suppressed ambition and a chilling clarity of purpose. In a series of swift, brutal moves, he purged his mother's lovers, most notably Lao Ai, whose attempted coup was crushed with overwhelming force. resulting in hundreds of executions and the public display of their severed heads. He then exiled his powerful regent Lu Buwei, skillfully orchestrating his downfall, forcing him to commit suicide to avoid a public disgrace that would have shattered his legacy. He eliminated any court faction that dared to challenge his absolute rule, sweeping away centuries of aristocratic privilege and tradition. This was not merely the act of a young man asserting his independence. It was a cold, calculated move to sweep away any potential rivals, familial, political, or military, and establish an uncontested iron grip on the reins of power. He was a force of nature, untamed and absolute, his will bending the entire state to his singular vision. Under his guidance, the Qin state, already formidable, became an unstoppable juggernaut. Zheng fully embraced legalism, a philosophy perfectly suited to his ambitions. It advocated for a strong, centralized government, strict laws, and harsh punishments to maintain order, viewing human nature as inherently selfish and requiring firm control. It dismissed traditional morality and Confucian benevolence as weaknesses, prioritizing instead absolute obedience to the state and meticulous adherence to a meticulously crafted legal code. This philosophy, brutal in its simplicity and uncompromising in its application, perfectly mirrored Zheng's own nature, transforming the Qin populace into a disciplined, unyielding instrument of conquest. His armies, led by brilliant and ruthless generals like Wang Jian and Li Xin, fueled by this ideology and organized with unparalleled efficiency, systematically devoured the remaining 6 kingdoms. One by one, state after state fell in a relentless 10-year campaign of overwhelming military force. Han, Zhao, Wei, Chu, Yan, and finally Qi in 221 BCE, leaving no rival standing. With each conquest, the land bled, and the Qin machine grew larger, more powerful, and more ruthless. The unification was not a gentle melding of cultures, but a violent subjugation marked by mass executions of defeated aristocrats, the displacement of populations, and the ruthless suppression of any lingering resistance or regional identity. Cities that resisted were razed, their inhabitants enslaved or put to the sword. Qin Shi Huang understood that true unification required not just military victory, but the obliteration of the old order and the forging of a new, singular identity dictated from the imperial center. It was a brutal, uncompromising triumph of military might and strategic genius, unparalleled in Chinese history, fundamentally reshaping the political landscape of the entire known world. In 221 BCE, with all rivals vanquished and the disparate lands unified under his iron fist, Zheng declared himself not merely a king, but something entirely new, something beyond mortal comprehension. Qin Shi Huangdi, the first August Emperor of Qin. He believed his dynasty would last 10,000 generations, an eternal reign reflecting his own desire to rule forever, a divine figure whose authority was unquestionable and whose vision was absolute. He had unified China, but in doing so, he had unleashed a level of centralized power and personal ambition that would not only redefine the very concept of emperorship for millennia to come, but ultimately consume himself and his short-lived dynasty in a blaze of glory and tyranny. Having brutally unified China, Qin Shi Huang faced an even greater challenge: how to govern such a vast, diverse, and recently conquered territory, transforming a collection of warring states into a single, cohesive entity. His solution was as radical as it was ruthless: an unprecedented centralization of power designed to dismantle the old feudal system and create a monolithic imperial state. He understood that military conquest alone was insufficient. The very fabric of governance needed to be rewoven. The traditional Zhou dynasty model, which had allowed regional lords to hold hereditary power, mint their own currency, and even field their own armies, was precisely what had led to centuries of fragmentation and ceaseless conflict. Qin Shi Huang viewed this decentralized system as a fundamental weakness, a constant invitation to rebellion and division. To counteract this, he initiated a sweeping administrative overhaul. a direct assault on millennia of tradition. The old aristocratic states were summarily abolished, their boundaries erased, their former rulers stripped of all authority and, in many cases, executed or forcibly relocated to the capital, Xianyang, where they could be closely monitored. In their place, he established a tightly controlled bureaucratic system of 36, later expanded to 42 commanderies, each subdivided into numerous prefectures. These units were not governed by hereditary nobility, but by carefully selected officials, civil governors, military commanders, and imperial inspectors, all directly appointed by and solely answerable to the central government. This wasn't merely a change in administrative boundaries, it was a fundamental shift in the distribution of power. No longer would local lords hold power by right of birth. Instead, competence and absolute loyalty to the emperor were the only currencies that mattered. Every aspect of local governance, from tax collection to justice, from conscription to infrastructure projects, flowed through this meticulous hierarchy, ensuring an iron grip on every corner of the vast realm. For Qin Shi Huang, efficiency and absolute unquestioned control were paramount, even if it meant violently shattering the existing social order and crushing any lingering regional identities. To truly forge a unified identity and a single economic and administrative space from the disparate kingdoms, the emperor embarked on an ambitious, breathtakingly comprehensive program of standardization. Imagine the chaos, the logistical nightmare of a newly unified land where every one of the former states had its own bewildering array of distinct written characters, its own unique forms of currency, its own system of weights and measures, and even different axle widths for carts. Such diversity crippled trade, complicated taxation, and made centralized communication a near impossibility. Qin Shi Huang recognized that true integration required not just political uniformity, but also a common operational language and framework for daily life and commerce. He mandated a single written script, known as the Small Seal script, across the entire empire. This was a monumental undertaking, as regional variations in writing had developed over centuries, making communication across former state borders incredibly difficult. The new script, derived from the Qin state's existing characters, was enforced with uncompromising severity. Imagine scribes and officials throughout the empire painstakingly learning and adopting this new standard, ensuring that decrees from the capital could be understood from the northern borders to the southern coasts, knitting together a vast bureaucracy and enabling unified record-keeping, law, and culture. While a tool of control, it also laid the foundation for a shared literary heritage that would endure for millennia. He standardized currency, replacing a confusing, inefficient, and often localized array of local coins, shell money, and primitive barter systems with a uniform, circular coin with a square hole in the middle, minted centrally. This single currency, the ban liang, facilitated trade across vast distances, simplified taxation, and bolstered the central government's economic control, eliminating the friction and uncertainty of diverse exchange rates. Weights and measures were likewise made consistent, from the smallest grain of rice to the largest cartload. Standardized bronze measures were distributed throughout the empire, ensuring that merchants traded fairly, or at least consistently, and that taxes could be collected equitably across all regions. These changes weren't merely administrative conveniences, they were economic anchors that bound the empire together, making it a single, functional market under the emperor's unquestioned authority. The integration was so profound that even the axle widths of carts were standardized, allowing them to travel on uniform ruts across his newly built road network. These seemingly mundane acts were, in fact, monumental feats of imperial will, designed to literally pave the way for a more integrated, controlled, and efficient empire, weaving the disparate threads of China into a single, cohesive fabric. His grand vision extended far beyond administrative and economic reforms. It encompassed the very physical landscape of his empire. He ordered the construction of a vast, unprecedented network of imperial roads, radiating like spokes from his capital at Shenyang to the farthest reaches of his domain. These were not mere dirt tracks. They were wide, meticulously engineered thoroughfares, often paved and lined with trees, designed to facilitate the rapid movement of troops, imperial officials, and goods. Imagine the thunder of a Qin army, unhindered by impassable terrain, or the swift dispatch of imperial decrees across thousands of miles, all thanks to this monumental infrastructure. Simultaneously, canals were dug and existing river systems connected, further integrating the empire both economically through improved transport of grain and goods, and militarily by allowing for the movement of supplies and soldiers. These projects were immense undertakings, requiring vast resources and, more importantly, immense human labor. Millions of peasants, conscripted into forced service from every corner of the newly unified realm, toiled under brutal, often deadly conditions. Whipped by overseers, inadequately fed, and pushed beyond the limits of human endurance, countless lives were sacrificed to lay the foundations of an empire that, ironically, would endure long after its founder. The scale of this human cost was staggering, a testament to the emperor's unwavering will and his complete disregard for individual suffering in pursuit of his grand, totalitarian vision. But this iron-fisted rule did not tolerate dissent, criticism, or any form of intellectual independence. Qin Shi Huang was not merely a unifier of territory and administration. He was also a censor and an oppressor of thought, believing that a unified mind was as crucial as a unified land. The legalist philosophy that had propelled him to power viewed independent thought, particularly from Confucian and Taoist scholars who often drew on historical examples to criticize contemporary rule, as a dangerous threat to imperial authority. Such intellectual freedom, to him, encouraged factionalism and undermined the absolute obedience necessary for a strong state. In 213 BCE, following a particularly irritating debate with court scholars, the emperor famously ordered the burning of books, a catastrophic intellectual purge aimed at eradicating any literature that challenged legalist principles, glorified the past feudal states, or offered alternative visions for governance. Imagine the intellectual richness of a civilization built over centuries, reduced to ash. Texts on agriculture, medicine, and divination were strategically spared, deemed practical and harmless to his authority. But classics of history, philosophy, and poetry, the very heart of ancient Chinese intellectual heritage, were consigned to the flames. This was a deliberate act of historical amnesia, enforced by imperial decree, a brutal severing of the past intended to ensure that future generations would know only the history and ideology sanctioned by the first emperor. It created an intellectual vacuum, fostering an environment where only imperial narratives could flourish. Even more chilling was the burying of scholars. The following year, angered by scholars who continued to criticize his policies, question his decisions, or hoard forbidden texts, Qin Shi Huang ordered the arrest of hundreds of them. According to tradition, a horrifying number, estimates range from 460 to 700, were buried alive in a gruesome public spectacle, while modern historians debate the exact number and method of their demise. Some suggest they were executed and then buried, rather than interred, alive. The underlying truth is clear and terrifying. The emperor would brook no opposition, no alternative viewpoints, no intellectual challenge to his absolute power. He wanted not just a unified land, but a unified mind, a singular ideology dictated from the imperial throne, ruthlessly eliminating anyone who dared to think independently. The message was unequivocally brutal. Dissent would be met with annihilation, and intellectual freedom was a capital offense. The human cost of this relentless pursuit of order and conformity was staggering, marked by forced labor on an unprecedented scale, brutal punishments for minor infractions, and the suffocating silence of intellectual terror that gripped the empire. He had built an empire of unparalleled scale and power, a machine of governance and control, but he had done so at the immense price of human freedom, intellectual diversity, and an ever-increasing climate of fear and paranoia. His vision was absolute, and his methods were merciless, forging a realm that was mighty but deeply scarred, a testament to the intoxicating and destructive nature of unchecked power. With his empire unified and his power absolute, Qin Shi Huang, the man who had conquered death on the battlefield, found himself increasingly haunted by a new, more insidious enemy, his own mortality. As he aged, his fear of death blossomed into an all-consuming obsession with eternal life. The emperor who had decreed a dynasty of 10,000 generations could not fathom his own passing. He believed himself indispensable, a divine ruler destined to reign forever. This profound fear, coupled with an unchecked ego that saw him as above natural law, drove him to embark on a desperate and ultimately tragic quest for the elixir of life, a misguided endeavor that would poison his mind and body more effectively than any external foe. He surrounded himself with a veritable menagerie of charlatans, alchemists, sorcerers, and self-proclaimed magicians, all eager to capitalize on his desperation and his limitless imperial resources. These opportunistic figures, skilled in flattery and manipulation, promised him immortality, whispering tales of mythical herbs hidden in remote mountains, secret rituals passed down from ancient sages, and hidden islands where the secrets of everlasting life resided. Qin Shi Huang, the pragmatic legalist who had scorned ancient traditions when they didn't serve his purpose, now clung to every fantastical tale, his formidable intellect clouded by a yearning no earthly power could satisfy. He became a captive of superstition, a ruler who once burned books of philosophy, now blindly believing in the most outlandish claims. The grandest of these ventures involved dispatching elaborate maritime expeditions into the treacherous eastern seas. Most famously, he tasked the ambitious court sorcerer Xu Fu with leading a vast fleet in search of the legendary Isles of the Immortals, Penglai, Fangjiang, and Yingzhou, believed to be enchanted lands shrouded in mists, inhabited by divine sages and immortal beings who held the true key to eternal youth. Imagine the scene. Thousands of young boys and girls, chosen for their purity and innocence, along with artisans, scholars, and vast provisions, packed onto mighty ships, sailing off into the unknown. They were meant as offerings, as companions for the immortals, or perhaps to serve the emperor in his future eternal existence. Xu Fu, a master of self-preservation, never truly returned with the elixir. With each failed voyage, he would invent increasingly elaborate excuses, ferocious sea monsters blocking his path, unfavorable winds, or the need for even more offerings and resources to appease the elusive gods. Each fabricated obstacle only fueled the emperor's increasing paranoia and his unshakable conviction that the elixir must exist, tantalizingly just out of reach, merely requiring greater effort or sacrifice to obtain. These massive expeditions, consuming immense wealth and human lives, became a recurring, desperate act, a stark manifestation of his refusal to accept mortality. But the most horrifying and tragically effective aspect of this quest was his growing reliance on compounds brewed by his alchemists. In ancient China, cinnabar, Mercury sulfide, was prized for its bright red pigment and its perceived mystical properties, often associated with vitality and life force. Alchemists, misinterpreting Mercury's unusual fluidity, its shimmering silver appearance, and its seemingly everlasting nature, as it doesn't decay like organic matter, fervently believed that purifying this liquid silver could yield the true elixir of life. They saw it as the ultimate transformative substance, capable of rendering the human body as indestructible as Mercury itself. Operating in secret laboratories deep within the palace, these alchemists concocted elaborate potions, often mixtures of mercury, lead, arsenic, and other toxic heavy metals, presenting them to the emperor as divine draughts of immortality. They would claim these substances cleansed the body, strengthened the spirit, and brought one closer to the realm of the immortals. Driven by an all-consuming desire to transcend human limits, Qin Shi Huang, desperate and trusting in the misguided wisdom of his court alchemists, eagerly consumed these deadly elixirs. He believed these shimmering, metallic liquids were the path to his destined eternity. Imagine the scene. The emperor, seated on his dragon throne, perhaps adorned in his finest imperial robes, meticulously sipping from a jade cup filled with a viscous, shimmering silver liquid, pure liquid mercury. He believed it was purifying his body, making him impervious to decay, granting him the very immortality he craved. Perhaps, in the initial stages, the stimulant effects of some of these toxic compounds might have produced a temporary sense of euphoria or increased energy, momentarily reinforcing his fatal delusion. But the tragic irony is almost unbearable. With every dose, he was slowly, agonizingly poisoning himself, ushering in the very decay he so desperately sought to conquer. The mercury relentlessly attacked his nervous system, his kidneys, his liver, and most devastatingly, his brain. It eroded his physical health, causing debilitating tremors, chronic pain, severe mood swings, increasing paranoia, and intense, uncontrollable rages. His judgment, once sharp and formidable in uniting a fractured land, became erratic and increasingly tyrannical. The man who had once been a decisive and strategic ruler now made arbitrary and often cruel decisions, his cognitive faculties steadily declining under the insidious influence of the poisons. His once unshakable confidence devolved into a deep-seated fear of assassination, an irony given that his own chosen path to immortality was killing him. He became obsessively secretive, convinced that enemies lurked in every shadow, leading to bizarre decrees that saw him sleeping in different palaces each night. His whereabouts kept secret even from his closest advisors and family, lest they too conspire against him. The vast, efficient bureaucracy he had painstakingly built now struggled to cope with the unpredictable demands of a ruler whose mind was being systematically dismantled by the very substances he believed would save him. Historians now widely believe that it was this very quest for eternal life, his blind faith in these toxic elixirs, that ultimately led to his premature death at the age of 49. The man who forged an empire of unparalleled strength, who commanded millions and sought to conquer even death, was ultimately defeated not by an army or a rebellion, but by his own misguided ambition, transformed by poisons into a tyrannical shadow of his former self. His reign, meant to be eternal, was cut short, a living testament to the fatal consequences of unchecked power and the desperate, foolish pursuit of an impossible dream. Qin Shi Huang's megalomania, now amplified by the mercury poisoning and his desperate, escalating fear of death, found their most enduring, colossal and terrifying expressions not in ephemeral elixirs, but in two monumental construction projects, the Great Wall and his hidden mausoleum. These weren't merely feats of engineering or grand displays of imperial power. They were visceral testaments to his boundless ambition, his perceived divine right to reshape the very earth, and his absolute, chilling disregard for human life, treating millions as nothing more than expendable cogs in his grand, morbid designs. The Great Wall, though extensively rebuilt and expanded by later dynasties, originated from Qin Shi Huang's brutal order to connect and reinforce existing defensive walls in the northern territories. Its purpose was clear: to forge an impenetrable, 1,000-mile-long shield, protecting his newly unified empire from the constant, shifting threat of the nomadic Xiongnu tribes. But the sheer scale of its construction was staggering, demanding an unimaginable toll. Millions of peasants, soldiers, and criminals were conscripted into forced labor, toiling relentlessly in unforgiving terrain, facing searing desert heat, bitter blizzards, rampant disease, and gnawing starvation. Imagine endless lines of skeletal laborers, their hands raw and bleeding, their backs breaking under impossible loads. dragging colossal stones across treacherous mountains and desolate plains. The human cost was immense. It's chillingly said that sections of the wall are built upon the bones of those who perished constructing it. For Qin Shi Huang, these lives were merely tools, expendable resources in the service of his imperial vision, a vast and permanent symbol of his dominion. Even more astonishing, and far more secretive, was the emperor's grandest, most audacious project, his mausoleum, discovered by sheer chance in 1974 by farmers digging a well. Buried beneath a massive man-made earthen mound designed to resemble a natural mountain, this tomb complex was conceived as an elaborate underground replica of his imperial palace and capital cities, and guarding it, in an act of unparalleled imperial narcissism, was an army unlike any other. Thousands upon thousands of life-size terracotta warriors, horses and chariots, each soldier with unique facial features, arranged in precise, formidable battle formation. This was not a mere burial. It was an attempt to replicate his entire earthly empire in the afterlife, ensuring his absolute power continued beyond death. The terracotta army was intended to protect him from spiritual enemies and extend his imperial dominion into eternity. Imagine the sheer audacity to believe an entire nation, recreated in clay, needed to be resurrected underground to serve one man's post-mortem ambitions. The construction of this colossal subterranean tomb, much like the wall, demanded an unimaginable workforce and precise artistry. Hundreds of thousands of artisans, laborers, and engineers, some sources suggesting up to 700,000 individuals, toiled for decades, crafting the individual figures with astonishing detail, digging the vast pits, and creating the elaborate underground palace. The main burial chamber itself, yet to be fully excavated, is widely rumoured to contain fantastical rivers of Mercury, a flowing testament to his fatal obsession, along with booby traps and unimaginable treasures, all meant to serve his dominion in death. Most chillingly, it is widely believed that many of the artisans and labourers involved in constructing the most secret parts of the tomb were sealed inside upon its completion, their knowledge silenced forever, ensuring its terrifying secrecy. Both the Great Wall and the Terracotta Army stand as powerful, haunting monuments to Qin Shi Huang's relentless ambition and profound fear of the unknown. They speak volumes about a ruler who sought to control every aspect of existence, even beyond the grave. These colossal structures, built with the blood, sweat, and tears of millions, are eternal reminders of a man who pursued immortality through both chemical poisons and colossal feats of human suffering. By 210 BCE, Qin Shi Huang's relentless quest for immortality had taken its inevitable, deadly toll. On one of his many tours across his vast empire, a tour often undertaken in secret due to his escalating paranoia, the emperor's health rapidly deteriorated. The years of ingesting mercury and other toxic elixirs had finally ravaged his body and mind. He died in Shakyu, far from his capital, at the age of 49. The very compounds he believed would grant him eternal life had instead delivered a slow, agonizing death. But the drama of his death was only the beginning of a desperate, ill-fated deception. His death occurred in the company of two ambitious and ruthless individuals, Zhao Gao, his chief eunuch, and Li Si, the chancellor. Fearing the chaos that would erupt if the emperor's death were announced far from the capital, and recognizing an opportunity to manipulate the succession, they conspired to conceal his demise. Imagine the stench of the decomposing imperial corpse, hidden within his lavish carriage, disguised by cartloads of salted fish to mask the odor. For 2 months, the living emperor's carriage continued its journey, his decrees forged by the conspirators, his presence mimicked by an increasingly terrified retinue. Their primary goal was to prevent the rightful heir, Fusu, a thoughtful and honorable prince, exiled to the northern frontier, from ascending the throne. Fusu had often clashed with his father over his harsh policies, advocating for a more benevolent rule, and therefore represented a threat to Zhao Gao and Li Si's power. Instead, they forged a decree ordering Fusu to commit suicide and appointing Hu Hai, a weaker, more malleable younger son. As the new emperor, Fusu, ever obedient, tragically took his own life upon receiving the false imperial order. Hu Hai, now Emperor Qin Shi, proved to be exactly the puppet his handlers desired. He indulged in extravagance, neglected the affairs of state, and allowed Zhao Gao to effectively rule the empire through him. The oppressive legalist policies continued, even intensified under Zhao Gao's sway. The empire, already strained by Qin Shi Huang's colossal projects and brutal rule, began to fray at the edges. Rebellions erupted across the land, fueled by years of resentment, forced labor, and heavy taxation. Peasants, desperate and starving, rose up against the tyrannical regime that had consumed their lives and their sons. The once mighty Qin dynasty, intended by its founder to last 10,000 generations, crumbled with astonishing speed. Within 3 years of Qin Shi Huang's death, the empire he had unified with such brutality and ambition was engulfed in civil war. Qin Shi was eventually forced to commit suicide by Zhao Gao, who himself was soon assassinated. By 206 BCE, the capital was sacked, and the Qin dynasty was utterly extinguished, replaced by the enduring Han dynasty. The man who had sought to defy death and rule forever had seen his imperial legacy, though enduring, be born from immense cruelty and quickly collapse due to the very forces he had unleashed. Qin Shi Huang remains one of history's most complex and polarizing figures. A visionary unifier who laid the foundations of China's imperial system, an innovator who standardized everything from script to currency, yet also a ruthless tyrant who burned books, buried scholars, and inflicted immense suffering on his people. His tomb, guarded by an army of clay, remains a testament to a man who tried to grasp eternity through sheer force of will, only to discover that ultimate power, unchecked ambition, and the misguided pursuit of immortality can be the most potent poisons of all. From the brutal battlefields of unification to the secret chambers where he ingested poison, the story of Qin Shi Huang is a staggering testament to the intoxicating allure of power and the terrifying pursuit of immortality. He built an empire that shaped China forever, yet destroyed himself and his dynasty in a desperate gamble against fate. His tomb, guarded by an army of clay, remains a silent monument to a man who tried to conquer death itself, only to be conquered by his own ambition. Thank you for joining us on this journey into the mind of China's first emperor. Until next time, keep digging into the depths of history, for it is there we find the most profound lessons.